Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Before we begin, take one slow breath, get comfortable, and let the world outside go quiet for a moment. Tonight, we are going to look into the eyes of the most famous painting on earth, and into the strange, lonely life of the man who made her. It is the morning of August 22nd, 1911, inside the Louvre Museum in Paris. A painter named Louis Barrault walks into a long gallery to copy a small portrait for a project. He stops. The wall in front of him is empty, where a woman in a dark dress had hung for years, smiling that quiet, unreadable smile. There are now only 4 iron hooks and a pale square of dust on the stone. At first, guards think the painting has simply been taken away to be photographed. Hours pass. Then a terrible silence falls over the museum because no one can find her. The Mona Lisa is gone. Newspapers across the world print her face on their front pages. French police question hundreds of suspects, including, strangely, a young artist named Pablo Picasso. For 2 years, the most recognized face in human history vanishes completely, and nobody knows if she is destroyed, hidden, or lost forever. Picture that. The world's most famous smile, missing, while millions of people search for her in the dark. Some people whispered that she had been destroyed. Others believed a wealthy collector had paid a fortune to hide her away forever, just to own that smile alone. At that moment, nobody could imagine how, or even if, she would ever be found again. But to understand why an entire nation grieved over one small wooden panel, we have to go back 400 years, to a hillside town in Italy, and to the strange, brilliant, restless man who painted her. His name was Leonardo da Vinci, and this is not only the story of a painting. It is the story of a boy who was never supposed to matter at all, and somehow became one of the most remarkable minds in human history. Leonardo was born in 1452, in a small town called Vinci, in the hills of Tuscany. He was what people of that time cruelly called illegitimate, a child born outside marriage, to a young peasant woman named Caterina and a respected notary, a man who handled legal documents, named Ser Piero. Because of this, doors that should have opened for a boy of his intelligence stayed firmly shut. He was barred from studying at university. He could not enter most respected professions. In the eyes of 15th century Florence, Leonardo was already, quietly, less than enough. He grew up partly in his father's house, and partly with his grandparents, never quite belonging fully to either family. Often left alone with his own thoughts, while other boys trained for the futures already chosen for them. Remember that feeling? The sense of standing slightly outside a door that everyone else could walk through. It will return later in his life, in a very different shape. And yet, even as a child, something in him refused to stay small. He filled pages, page after page, with drawings of birds, water, machines, and the human body, long before anyone called this art or science. At 14, he was sent to Florence to apprentice, under a master named Andrea del Verrocchio, a painter and sculptor who trained the city's most promising young talent. Apprentices in his workshop ground paint, cleaned brushes, and slowly, patiently, earned the right to touch a real canvas. According to the writer Giorgio Vasari, who later wrote about Leonardo's life, the boy's talent appeared so suddenly and completely that his own master, Verrocchio, supposedly put down his brush forever after seeing what young Leonardo could do. True or not, the story tells us something real. This strange, illegitimate boy from Vinci was already becoming impossible to ignore. But brilliance, on its own, is not the same as success. As Leonardo grew older, a troubling pattern began. He would accept a commission, a paid project, pour himself into it with extraordinary care, and then, again and again, leave it unfinished. He sketched endlessly, studied anatomy by dissecting bodies in candlelight, designed flying machines and war weapons that would not exist for centuries, and filled more than 7,000 pages of notebooks, written backward, right to left, so that only a mirror could read them easily. Some historians believe he wrote this way, simply because he was left-handed and it stopped the ink from smudging. Others believe he was protecting his ideas. Either way, picture a man so private that even his own handwriting kept secrets. In one notebook, beside a sketch of a bird's wing, he wrote a line that still echoes today: "That art is never truly finished, only abandoned." His mind moved faster than his hand, faster than his patron's patience, faster, it seemed, than time itself. Commissions piled up unfinished. Frustrated clients waited months, then years, for paintings that never arrived. Can you imagine that? A man this gifted, and still, people doubted whether he would ever finish anything at all. Then came a decision that changed everything. In his early 30s, Leonardo left Florence, the city that had trained him, but never quite believed in him, and offered his services to Ludovico Sforza, the powerful Duke of Milan. In his letter to the Duke, Leonardo did not even lead with painting. He listed himself as a military engineer, a designer of bridges, cannons, and siege weapons, almost as an afterthought, mentioning he could also paint. This was the turning point. In Milan, away from the shadow of his old reputation, Leonardo reinvented himself, not just as an artist, but as an inventor, a scientist, and a court entertainer who designed festivals and stage machinery for the Duke. It was in Milan that his rise became visible to the whole world. He painted the Last Supper on the wall of a quiet dining hall, a depiction of Christ's final meal with his disciples. And even though Leonardo's experimental painting technique would later cause the work to decay badly within decades, the emotional power of those 13 faces around one table stunned everyone who saw it. He studied light the way other men studied scripture. He noticed how shadow could soften an edge, how a smile could live not in the mouth, but in the corners of the eyes. He filled new notebooks with studies of swirling water, the muscles of a horse's leg, the exact way candlelight falls across a folded piece of cloth. This obsession with soft, smoky transitions between light and dark would later have a name, sfumato, meaning smoke, like, and it would become the secret heartbeat of his most famous painting. Remember that word. It will matter very soon. But this was not the end of the story, because the world Leonardo lived in was never stable for long. Wars swept through Italy. The Duke of Milan was captured by French forces. Patrons who once protected and paid Leonardo died, fled, or lost their power overnight. By his late 40s, the brilliant engineer of Milan was, once again, a man without a steady home, wandering between Florence, Venice, and Rome, taking small jobs, watching younger, hungrier artists like Michelangelo rise quickly while he, still endlessly curious, still endlessly slow, struggled to finish what he started. This was his greatest test, not a battle or an illness, but the quiet, grinding fear that a mind this remarkable might still end in failure. He moved his belongings from city to city in worn travel chests, his notebooks always close at hand, even as his reputation grew uncertain. Maybe you know that fear too. The fear of working hard at something and wondering if it will ever truly be finished. And then, somewhere around 1503, in Florence, Leonardo began a small portrait. The subject was Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo, which is why, in Italian, the painting is sometimes called La Gioconda. There was nothing unusual about the commission itself. Wealthy merchants often paid artists to paint their wives. But Leonardo, true to his nature, did not simply paint a portrait. He layered thin glazes of paint, sometimes so fine they were almost transparent, building her face slowly across months, then years, blending every edge with that same smoky sfumato technique he had studied for decades. He gave her a smile that seems to shift depending on where you look, present in the corner of her eyes, uncertain at the edge of her mouth. He worked in a quiet studio lit only by soft daylight, often laying down a single layer of paint, so thin it had to dry for days before the next one could be added. He never delivered the painting to the merchant who paid for it. Instead, Leonardo kept her. For 16 years, through changing cities, changing rulers, and his own declining health, he carried this small wooden panel with him, quietly adjusting her, refining her, as if she were not a commission at all, but a private conversation he could never finish having. Remember the boy who once left projects unfinished because his ambition outran his patience? This time, the unfinished feeling was different. This time, it was love for the work itself that would not let go. In 1516, an aging Leonardo accepted an invitation from the young King of France, Francis I, and moved to a quiet manor house near the Loire Valley, bringing with him a handful of his most treasured paintings, including her. By then, his hands, the same hands that had drawn the human heart in astonishing detail, had begun to weaken, possibly from a stroke. He could no longer paint with the same steady control. And yet, according to legend recorded by Vasari, when Leonardo died in 1519, it was in the arms of King Francis himself, an old genius, far from the hillside town, that once refused to fully accept him, finally surrounded by someone who saw his worth completely. Historians today gently question whether the king was truly present at that exact moment, but the story endures because it captures something true, a man who spent his life slightly outside, finally, briefly, brought inside. Here is the quiet cost beneath the brilliance. Leonardo da Vinci never married. He left behind no children, no workshop fully completed, no single masterpiece he ever called finished. Vasari recorded a feeling close to this, that Leonardo believed his artistic debt to the world remained unpaid, even as he lay dying. Across his whole life, this restless, illegitimate boy from Vinci produced fewer than 20 surviving paintings, an almost shockingly small number for someone now called one of history's greatest minds. He left behind thousands of pages instead, full of unfinished questions about flight, water, light, and the human body, questions the world would spend centuries slowly answering after him. Greatness, for Leonardo, was never a finish line. It was a long, lonely, beautiful, unfinished road. So what happened to her? The small woman, who waited quietly through all of this, and who later vanished from the Louvre in 1911. After 2 years missing, in 1913, an Italian handyman named Vincenzo Peruggia, who had once worked at the Louvre, was caught trying to sell her to an art dealer in Florence. He had simply lifted her off the wall, hidden her under his coat, and walked out the front door during opening hours. He claimed he wanted to return her to Italy, where he believed she belonged. The painting that had once been a quiet, private companion to a wandering genius was now, suddenly, the most famous fugitive in the world, and her safe return only deepened the mystery and the magic surrounding her face. Today, the Mona Lisa hangs behind protective glass in the Louvre, visited by millions of people every year, each of them searching her quiet expression for an answer that may not exist. Scientists have studied her smile using modern imaging technology and still debate exactly why it seems to change as you move. Art historians still argue over whether Lisa Gherardini was even the only woman painted into that face, or whether Leonardo, in his final years, slowly blended in something of himself. The mystery was never really solved. Perhaps that is exactly why, After 500 years, we are all still here. Still looking, still standing quietly in front of a small wooden panel, waiting for her to tell us something she never quite will. My friends, maybe your own progress feels quiet right now, the way Leonardo's life often did, full of pages and ideas no one else can fully see yet. Maybe some days the words of a new language still feel far away, slow to arrive, easy to abandon. But notice this. Leonardo da Vinci is remembered not because he finished everything, but because he refused to stop returning to the work that mattered most to him, layer by layer, year after year, until something quietly became timeless. You are doing the same thing, right now, one sentence, one word, one small brave attempt at a time. Even the smallest sentence you speak today is, in its own quiet way, a brushstroke. You are building something, even on the days it does not feel that way. So before you go tonight, I want to ask you something gentle. Which part of Leonardo's story stayed with you the most? The boy who was once told he did not fully belong, or the old man who finally briefly did? Write it in the comments below. I would love to read your thoughts. And if his quiet, unfinished smile gave you even a small moment of wonder tonight, stay close, because there are many more stories like this waiting for you. Rest well, keep learning gently, and I will see you again very soon. This is Talewise English.